Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 9th of February 2018. So coming to the first article. Now this being a Friday, it is the customary yes, no and it's complicated article. The topic however is very important as it is a direct question which can be asked, which is that should states have their own flags? Now what is the context of this particular article? The context here is that recently the Karnataka government had constituted a committee to design a flag for the state of Karnataka, and this committee has now come up with the design of the flag, and so now questions are being raised that should this be allowed or it should not be allowed. So that is the context of the editorial. Now coming to the analysis, the first justification, the first view or the first opinion of the editorial is that yes, states should be allowed to have their own flags. Several aspects have been discussed under this argument. The first is with regards to a legal provision. Now here the author has said that there is no legal bar for states to have their own flags, neither in the constitution nor in the parliament or nor through any other law. Now coming a bit into the details, coming to the constitutional aspects, here the author says that the 7th schedule of the constitution largely discusses about the division of powers between the union, state and the concurrent list. Now under this schedule there is no mention as to why the state should not be having a power to make their own flag. Also the union has not been given any exclusive power to control the states on having their own flag. So in this regard definitely states can have their own flags. Another thing is with regards to the article 51A, which deals with the fundamental duties. Now here also there is a fundamental duty which is to respect the national flag, but this does not speak anything about an analysis on the state flag. So even if you are demanded to have a duty to respect the national flag, this does not mean that you cannot respect any other flag. So that is something that has been analyzed with regards to the constitutional provisions. Now coming to the parliamentary provisions, Parliament has time and again made laws with regards to the national flag, the first of them being the Emblems and Names Act of 1950. Now this is largely an act of the Parliament which deals with the prevention of improper use of the national emblems, which includes the national flag. So here also the author says there is no mention of the fact that there cannot be another national emblem, or for that matter a state emblem, which will be a state flag. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that even in the other act, which is of Prevention of Insults to the National Honor Act of 1971, it lays down provisions like you cannot insult the national flag. For example, one cannot burn the national flag. But here also the provisions are silent on the aspect that can states have their own flag. So definitely even under this provision there is no bar for states to have their own flag. Another thing is which has been analyzed is with respect to the other laws. For example, the Flag Code of 2002, here again the author says that it allows for hosting of other flags but with some cautions. For example, if another country's flag or some other flag needs to be hosted, there is a caution that it should not be from the same mast as the Indian flag. Also, foreign countries' flags should fly lower to the Indian flag. These are the norms which are laid down in this code. But again here, there is no provision that the states cannot have their flags. And also, the author is bringing about an analysis here where he says that in India, it is very much allowed to have flags of other countries only if they are within the norms of the flag code. So if flags of other countries can be hoisted in India, then why not flags of states should be allowed to be hoisted in India? So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to the aspirations of the people. Now here you need to understand that in India, states are not divided as per some administrative convenience, but rather the divisions of states is largely based on linguistics. And linguistics, that means, is an important part of the culture in India. So if states are divided on cultural aspects, which includes linguistics, then definitely there are going to be aspirations of the people to promote their own culture and to promote their own language. So in this regard, they might want to have some symbols which will strengthen their cultural values, and in this regard a flag is a pertinent symbol, and so this aspiration of the people to have a state flag is something that is justified and it cannot be outrightly rejected. So that is the analysis which has been drawn. Another thing is that this idea of states having their own flags is being challenged on the grounds that it is going to threaten the national integrity in the country. But here some analysis is what is vital is that previously you need to know that even the linguistic states, the idea of having state divided on the basis of linguistics was something that was not accepted, and it was feared that this is going to impact the national integrity. However, our experience has taught us that despite the fact that states in India were divided as per the linguistics criteria, this has not impacted the national integrity. Rather, it has strengthened the national integrity as legitimate aspirations of the people were allowed to have been met, and so the people also felt that that they could contribute to nation building in a legitimate, democratic and free space. So if this is the idea, then definitely if states are allowed to further express themselves through a state flag, then definitely it is going to strengthen national integrity rather than weaken it. So this analysis which is important is with relation to the formation of linguistic states itself. So that is what is vital here. Another thing is that the author makes a case that there are already separate flags for the different armed forces. For example, the army has a separate flag, the navy has a separate flag, and the air force has a separate flag, and paramilitary forces also have separate flags. And not only that, these flags are time and again hoisted on major events. For example, even on the Republic Day, these armed forces march under their own flags along with the Indian flag. So if armed forces can be allowed to have their own flags, then why not states also be allowed to have their own flags? Another thing is some global examples is what has been given. For example, in US, all the 50 states have their own flags. Now, one might argue that US has dual citizenship, but then we might come to UK, which has single citizenship. But in UK also, different flags are allowed for England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. They all have different flags. So in this respect, from this experiment, global experiment, as these both UK as well as US are major democracies, so taking from their examples, India should also allow for states to have their own flag. So that is the case here. Another thing is an analysis of the democratic as well as federal principles. Now, both democracy as well as federalism allow greater freedom to the states to decide for themselves. And in line with both these ideals, it should be much accepted that states should be allowed to have their own flags. So this is the compilation of the yes arguments. Definitely these arguments are all acceptable and they are valid. Now coming to the second part of the debate, which is about no, that the states should not be allowed to have their own particular flags. Now the arguments given are, first and foremost, is that of the constitution maker's vision. Now here the author has made a claim that this question was raised at the time of formation of the constitution itself, and at that point of time the constitution makers were very much they delved into this matter deeply, they debated this matter deeply, and they were very much cautious, and as a result of which, after deep deliberations, they had denied this right to the states. And so that is something that should be respected even today, as it is not something that is envisaged in the constitution. So why allow it today? So that is the first analysis. Another analysis is with regards to an opening of a Pandora's box. Now here the author says that if this trend is allowed, then it is going to open a Pandora's box, because similar demands will come from all over the country, and not only at the state level. Such demands can come at a sub-regional level also. For example, there is an issue in Darjeeling about the Gorkha land. So that is a sub-regional issue. It can happen. The West Bengal will ask for a separate flag, and within West Bengal, Gorkha land will ask for another separate flag. So definitely it will lead to a problem. It will lead to an opening of a Pandora's box, which should be curbed. So that is one analysis. Another aspect which the author has analyzed here is with regards to the other countries. Now, as I discussed before also, that US and UK allow this. Here the author says that India's trajectory of development is something that is very different from both US as well as UK. India has its own history and India has its own challenges. India's nationalism is not at the stage at which US and UK are. So definitely India should focus on its own needs and not get influenced by other countries. So that is the case that has been drawn here. Another thing is with regards to the constitutional provisions. Now, as I mentioned before also, the constitution makers did not envisage that India should have the Indian state should have separate flags. So definitely in this respect also, the constitution has not called for separate such freedoms to the states. Another thing is that the constitutional provisions are liberal. They have allowed for expression of aspirations of the citizens through various other ways. For example, they have a fundamental right of protection of their cultural rights. So definitely there are several scopes for for the people to express their aspirations rather than demand for such kind of politically sensitive matters like having their own flags. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to the foundational values of the constitution. Now, as we have discussed time and again, the foundational values of the constitution are that of a of India as a union of states rather than a federation of states. So in this spirit also, the ideas of single citizenship is something that was advocated, and a single national emblem like national flag, all of them are somehow sources of national integration, and these are the foundational values which should not be meddled with. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to political symbols of state may compete with the national symbols. Now this might happen because of the diverse politics in this country. India has a multi-party governance system, so it might just happen that these matters of national symbols might just get politicized. So that is something that is going to have adverse impacts, and a competition might arise between national symbols and state symbols. So this is something that is going to be unhealthy. Another analysis which the author has given is with regards to the S.R. Bomani case. Now this was a case between, this is a very landmark judgment by the Supreme Court. The S.R. Bomani was a Union of India judgment. This case was, this case came to prominence in the year 1994, and it was with regards to the provisions of Article 356, and it tried to curb the excesses by the center, and it restored some powers to the states with regards to the democratic rights of the states. And it was said that this president's rule cannot be imposed in the states without any legitimate basis. So that is what the S.R. Bomani case talked about. Now it is under this case and this judgment that several states are making an analysis that the states should be free, and the union shouldn't meddle with the affairs of the states. However, the author here is saying that the S.R. Bomani case was specific to the Article 356, and it has not given a judgment with regards to state symbols. So in that regard, if unnecessarily a analysis is going to be made, or a parallel is going to be drawn of interpreting the judgment with in the context of this issue of flags of the state, then this is something that is going to be over interpreting the judgment. So this is something that is unethical, and such backdoor entry or backdoor justification should not be done. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is that it is argued that already Jammu and Kashmir has a flag of its own. Now here you need to know that despite the fact that Jammu and Kashmir has a flag of its own, this is something that was envisaged under the constitution itself. Under Article 370 of the constitution, Jammu and Kashmir was given a special status. This status has not been given to other states, and so these states, the demands of these states that they should be treated as Jammu and Kashmir is something that is unacceptable. So that is something that is important. Another thing is that the constitution makers have envisaged for a strong center. A number of laws have made centers superior to the states. For example, it's only the centers who can carve out a new state. It is only the centers who can rename a state. So definitely this role of center is prominent, and it is a binding force for the entire country. And in this respect too, it should not be diluted, is what has been advocated here. Another issue, as we have discussed previously also, is that of politicization of this issue. The national emblems and national symbols are supreme, and politics on them should not be advocated, or it should not be encouraged. So definitely from that perspective also, here the claim has been made that state symbols should not be encouraged. So that is the analysis here. Now coming to the third analysis, which is the most important analysis, the balanced view, is that it is complicated. This topic is indeed complicated, and a mixed view is what has been given. The first analysis is with regards to nationalism in India. Now, first and foremost, you need to understand what is nationalism. Now, nationalism is a spirit of oneness. It is a feeling of oneness amongst the citizens of India, irrespective of the fact that we are given this title of citizens of India. There is a common feeling of fraternity towards another fellow being. So this fraternity is what binds a country, and this is what is the spirit of nationalism. It is not dependent on the fact that a country exists or it does not exist. Even when India was not a formal country, it was under the British rule. Even at that point of time, the citizens had a spirit of nationalism towards each other. Even today, for example, in Palestine is not a country, but still the people of Palestine may have a feeling of nationalism, and so they believe that they are one people. So this is a matter of feeling. It is a matter of a spirit rather than a technicality. So that is something that you need to understand first and foremost with regards to nationalism. Now coming to nationalism in India, some questions is what has been raised here. First is that will strengthening of territorial identities erode the national identity? Is the nationalism in India so weak that if a state wants to have its own flag so that its own aspirations are met, then in that case we are fearing that it is going to impact the nationalism of the country? So that is one important question which has been raised. Another thing is that nationalism is not something which is an outside concept. it cannot be imposed externally. It cannot be imposed through a law. Rather, it is a spirit, it is an inbuilt feeling, and it needs to be generated over a period of time. So whether or not a state has a flag or not, it will not impact the national integrity of India. So that is an analysis. Now, another very important aspect is with regards to an analysis of sports. Now, here the author has made a good comparison where he says that NRIs are often seen to favor or appreciate or praise the cricket team, Indian cricket team or Indian sporting teams. In that case, we appreciate it. However, if within the country a citizen of India is appreciating another foreign country's team, then in that situation, often it leads to a lot of conflict, and it often leads to violence in the country. So this is something that needs to be questioned as to what is the mode of nationalism we are favoring. So that is a pertinent question. Another thing is with regards to IPL. Now in IPL, you need to know we have state-wise division of cricket teams. For example, it is the Kings 11 of Punjab, or for that matter other states. So in that regard, does this mean that we are favoring a regionalism and we are challenging the national integrity of the country? It does not happen like that. Even if a citizen is favoring one state team over the other state team, it does not mean that at a national level the citizen will not favor the Indian cricket team. So that is some analysis which the author has given, and these kind of practical examples is something that UPSC will always welcome in your answers. I have mentioned it before also. So try and bring these answers, these newness into your answers is something that that will fetch you much more marks. So that is the analysis here. Another analysis is with regards to a hierarchy of loyalties. Now here the author is saying that instead of isolating identities and instead of rather forcing nationalism, what is important is that a hierarchy of loyalty should be encouraged in the country, and this in true sense will strengthen India. Now how is this hierarchy of loyalties, how can these hierarchies of loyalties be established? Or this is what is going to comprise the final opinion, because in these debates one can go on justifying a particular case from either side, but a final opinion is something that is vital. So this idea of hierarchy of loyalties is something that you can use in your final opinion. Here it should be understood that India should recognize the state identities, and the state should further recognize sub-regional identities. And even at the sub-regional level, what should be identified is that individual identities should be respected. So when this upward chain is established, where there is individual identity, there is sub-regional identity, there is state identity, and then there is national identity, then this will result in a compact structure which will enforce national integration and unity. So this is something that has been advocated here. This is the key spirit of nationalism, and such issues like state flags and all should not be so much a threat to the national integration, especially 70 years after India's independence. So that is something that has been analyzed, and this is the opinion that you also should advocate, because one cannot be having a closed mindset that states should be completely banned from having state flags, because you need to understand that states already have some state symbols. For example, states have the state animals, they have the state flowers. So why not a state flag also? So definitely some openness in the opinion should be there, but indeed some checks also need to be ensured that the matter should not be politicized, and it should be in spirit of increasing national integration rather than spreading regionalism. So that is the final opinion which even you should have. Indeed, the topic is very important from GS paper 2 point of view. You can even find it as a direct question in your UPSC papers. Now coming to the next article, big discoveries have small origins. The opinion is that one route to help the cause of science is to provide more funds for small scale research projects. Now the context here is that recently the Economic Survey has had a chapter on transforming science and technology in India. So in that respect, and this editorial has been written. Now coming to the important issues which have been discussed. The first issue is with regards to doubling of research and development expenditure in the country. Now here the editorial brings to the fore this is some data which even the Economic Survey has highlighted, that at present India's expenditure on research and development is minimal. It is about rupees 1 lakh crore only, and this is approximately 0.8% of the GDP. Now compared to other countries like the US, China, Israel, Japan, in these countries the expenditure is almost greater than 2% of GDP. So definitely India should progress in this regard, and it should be doubled. So that is something that has been advocated. Another thing here is that these funds are definitely low in India, but specifically they are low for the small scale science research in the country. So this is something that the author has brought to the fore here, and he has said that this is one aspect of the science and technology expenditure which is ignored. It is often said that this this expenditure is less for big projects, but that is not the case. The big projects are still funded. It is the small scale science research projects in the country which are facing severe cash crunch. So that is what has been mentioned. Another thing is that the author has highlighted some examples where he has stressed upon the relevance of small scale science research. For example, he has said that the Higgs boson project at the CERN has an annual cost of $1 billion. But this project itself started as a very small project by Peter Higgs, who was initially working on a low budget and was working independently. So if it was not for the small scale science research at that point of time, this biggest science and research project would not have developed. So that is one case. Another case is with regards to Dr. C.V. Raman's and his C.V. Raman spectrometers. Here again the author says that today this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but initially it started when Dr. C.V. Raman used to conduct scientific researches in his lab at a small scale. So that is another example. Another example is with regards to Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. Here also he has said that initially Dr. Vikram Sarabhai used to conduct small scale experiments on rockets, and it was only later that this expanded to form the ISRO. So definitely small science research, small scale science research is the nexus for any bigger project. So that is what has been analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to a mission oriented projects. Now here the author has brought to the fore that funding for science projects in India is specifically mission oriented. For example, if there is a mission of Chandrayaan, then large amount of funds will go to the Chandrayaan project. Now definitely this is something that is needed, and the author is not refuting entirely the need for mission oriented sponsoring of projects, but he is saying that this should not completely choke funds for the small scale science research. For example, at a smaller scale, a scientist is studying about the surface of moon. So that is something that should also be encouraged, along with a project for sending a spacecraft to moon. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to a research ecosystem in the country. Now here the author has made this analysis that there is a severe lack of research ecosystem in the country, and this is largely because these small scale science research projects are not what is encouraged. So this has had several impacts. For example, a lack of weak research ecosystem will result in a less human resource available for bigger projects. Another thing is that it is this research ecosystem which feeds innovation pipelines. So if these pipelines are cut, then definitely it is going to have impacts on the larger innovation projects in the country. And indeed, this is a major problem which India is also facing, as time and again the Prime Minister has raised the need to increase innovation in this country. So definitely for that, what is important is that small scale science research projects are encouraged. That is the analysis. Another thing is with regards to an enhanced competitive research grants. Now here the author is saying that these that there is a need to ensure competitive research grants to IITs, Indian Institute of Science, and other universities. And it is only through these that small scale science research is going to be encouraged, rather than giving funds only to bigger institutes. So that is something that is analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to our relevance of small ideas. Here the author says that it is the small ideas which further grow into bigger ideas and become game-changing ideas. Definitely we have seen this all across the world, that any big idea was once a smaller idea. So that is the entire gist of this editorial. Now, though this topic is a specific one because it deals with only one aspect of science and technology, but this argument is valid, and if you are to analyze the issues related to science and technology in the country, then definitely this entire gist, this entire point is relevant, that small scale science projects need to be encouraged. That is the relevance here. Coming to the next article, ceasefire. Now the context here is that to the year 2017 saw the highest number of ceasefire violations across the LOC since 2003. So that is something that is important. And recently there has been a death of four Indian soldiers at the LOC, one of them who was an army captain. So indeed this is a saddening affair, and that is the context here. Now coming to some background, the ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan was signed in the year 2003. Now what is vital here for you to know is that the backdrop in which this agreement was signed. 1999 was the year of Kargil war. Not only that, in the year 2001, the Parliament of India was attacked, and India and Pakistan almost were at a verge of another war in this year of 2001. So despite all these severe challenges, this agreement was what was signed in the year 2003, and this indeed was one of the most successful agreements between India and Pakistan. So that is something that is relevant in the background aspect. Now, coming to the issues which are important, the first issue is with regards to the military casualties, which is rising in both the countries, and especially for India, it is a major cause of concern because these casualties had severely reduced since 2003, and now they are seeing a sudden surge. So, definitely, this is something that is unwelcome. Another thing is with regards to damage to the life and livelihood of people living in the border areas. This is important in the analysis of border management because these people are being punished for no crime of theirs, and this human aspect is something that needs to be restored in the India-Pakistan relation. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another very important analysis is that there is a need for a high-level political intervention, and this is something that is not happening. In a few months, there are elections expected in Pakistan and also in India. Next year there are elections in India, so definitely this matter is now very politically sensitive, and both the countries are having a deadlock in high level political intervention. So that is the cause of this problem not being subdued. So that is the analysis. Another thing is that there is a spiral of daily exchanges between both India and Pakistan, which is a major cause of concern. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is that this is leading to a massive displacement of civilians in the border areas, and this is creating a refugee problem for both the countries. So definitely this issue of ceasefire violation is something that is very important. India-Pakistan relations are considered to be the lowest at this point of time. So definitely in that respect also this entire editorial is what is relevant, and also you need to focus on the humane aspect of this issue. So that is the entire relevance of this particular article. Now coming to the next article, a disquieting silence. Now previously we have had a discussion on the refugee crisis or refugee issue. So please go and watch that video. That is a very important all-encompassing video on this topic. So this article is largely a repetition, but only some few new points is what has been mentioned. So I shall be restricting the discussion to that aspect only. Now, indeed, the context is Rohingya issue. The large number of Rohingya refugees are coming from the Rakhine province of Myanmar into India, and they are not being allowed to enter the Indian premises. And even the ones who have entered India, it is being said that they are illegal immigrants and they will be deported back. So that is the entire context. Now, the issues which are important is that of radicalization. Now, there are two aspects to this issue. The Indian government is claiming that there is a problem of radicalization amongst the Rohingya Muslims. Now, one claim is that this argument by the government is a false argument. Now, if that is the case, then definitely it is an unethical precedent and irresponsible statement by India. However, even if this is true, then this is a major challenge for India because India shares a huge border with Myanmar. So, if there is a radicalization, then this is definitely going to impact India also. So, in that regard, India should be ultra cautious, and India should be even more participated and more explicitly participating in resolving the Rohingya issue. So that is one analysis which has been given. Another thing is with regards to the moral responsibility of India. Now we had discussed previously also that there is an ethical component associated to it. Now here you need to know that India is not a signatory to the 1951 UN Convention on Refugees. Under this convention, any country is not allowed to send back refugees to a country where they fear the risk of being killed. So India is saying that because India is not a signatory to this convention, India can send back the Rohingya refugees back to Myanmar and back to the Rakhine province. But here the question is being raised that it is obvious that these people are facing an ethical cleansing and they have severe threats to their lives. So in that case, isn't it a moral responsibility for a country like India to save the lives of people? So that is one question which has been time and again raised, and it is pertinent in this case. Another thing is that India is ceding ground to China. Yesterday also we discussed that in Maldives issue, China is emerging as a major player and China is greatly participating in resolving the crisis in Maldives. Also in Myanmar, China is taking a leadership role. It is taking a flag bearer of resolving the Rohingya issue. So again here India is ceding ground to China, which is something that is not welcome because since the past traditionally India has had a much more association in the neighborhood. India has had a much more proactive role in its neighbors. So compared to China, so definitely this is a cause of concern and India should step up its role in acting as a peace giver to the region. So that is something that has been analyzed. Now again I am mentioning this topic of Rohingyas as well as the refugee crisis is something that is very important. So please go and watch that video. Now based on today's discussion, here are some questions which I would suggest you should try and attempt. Please try and attempt them in a word limit of 150 words. So that is about these questions. With this we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow.